Welcome to episode 17 of the Leading Complexity podcast. This is where we explore the art of leading organization in today's complex, hyper-competitive landscape. In this episode, we will explore cutting-edge strategies with some of the foremost thinkers in leadership. Join us and discover how to make your organization thrive and lead in a constantly evolving world. My name is Tomas Björkholm, and with me I have Michael Göthe.
And today we will explore the insights, the valuable insights from Matthew Skelton. Matthew Skelton is most famous for co-authoring the book Team Topologies, organizing business and technology teams for fast flow. That book has been highly influential in the area of organizational design.
So let's look at the interview.
Yeah.
Hi, and welcome to this interview. With me today, I have Matthew Skelton. And Matthew, welcome to both this interview and to the program Leading Complexity. But for those that don't know you, could you please present yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Thomas. Good to be here. So I'm Matthew Skelton. I'm the co-founder at Conflux, and I'm the co-author of the book Team Topologies. Looks like this. This is now almost 4 years since the book was published. It was published in September 2019. And we did a follow-up book called Remote Team Interactions Workbook that was published in early 2022, which is a little bit like an appendix that deals with some of the remote and hybrid working challenges that organizations now find themselves in. My background is in software engineering, but increasingly over my career I've been involved more and more in helping work be more effective. So working with teams, looking at the flow of work, looking at the way in which tools interact with teams and their ability to do things effectively or not. And that obviously up to 4 years ago led to me writing with Manuel Paish, my co-author of the Team Topologies book. And since then, last 4 years, we've been heavily involved in helping lots of organizations around the world to think about fast flow, think about cognitive load, think about Conway's law, all the kind of things we talk about in the Team Topologies book. And really, I guess, seeing the scale of the challenge that really exists in industry across many different sectors. And Team Topologies is helping with that, helping to address that challenge. But the challenge is quite substantial as organizations try to grapple with kind of complexity and uncertainty and volatility and all these kind of things.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you wrote the book, and it's one of my favorites. And for everyone listening to this that have not read it, please do. It's helping a lot to understand the idea of the organization and how to get better flow. So, Matthew, this program will be about complexity, and I guess you have a lot of things to say about complexity. So what is complexity for you, and what are your best advices for leaders who is maneuvering in complexity?
So the first thing I think I end up saying to leaders is, like, what kind of complexity are you really talking about? Because there's complexity which is, oh, this thing is really difficult, and it feels all kind of lots of different parts, lots of different things interconnected. And that's kind of fine as one kind of complexity, but there's obviously the complexity that is different from something being complicated. So drawing on the kind of definitions from Dave Snowden and Knepin and that kind of thing, and plenty of other people too, to indicate that actually there's sort of different ways of responding in different situations. Some situations might actually need lots of expertise, but it's still to some extent kind of mechanical, if you like, how that thing needs to be addressed. In other situations, you've got this emergent behavior from distributed actors deciding to operate independently in the space. Of course, the IT industry discovered kind of complexity through the emergence of cloud computing and kind of web scale systems, because if you go back to the software systems of, say, the 90s and early 2000s, these were often quite involved, but they were still under the control of, if you like, a single kind of a single organization or single software provider. And so the actual amount of emergent complexity is relatively small, whereas when you start to connect together computer systems from around the world and they're doing random different things and they've got slightly different errors, and then effectively behavior emerges out of that kind of system, that's a very different, it needs a very different kind of way of operating and working with that kind of system of systems often. And I think it's fair to say that traditional management training and education in your MBA and this kind of thing, most of that kind of approach doesn't deal with emergent complexity, that kind of emergent behavior at all. Like there's certainly very few education systems worldwide that have had kind of that kind of emergent behavior as part of the core curriculum, or perhaps almost none since, well, forever, effectively. Maybe here and there, but not as a general rule. And so we have an entire generation of leaders and emerging leaders who are only just getting to grips with this way of thinking. Like, we can't control the outcomes directly. We can't control it by more project management, by more people, or by more rules, or more auditing, or any of this kind of stuff. You can't control this stuff because it's fundamentally the wrong way to operate in that kind of environment. And this is really disorientating for lots of people in general, whether they're managers or not, or leaders. Is very disorientating. And so having to describe, like, it's important to describe the kind of approaches that actually can work in this space. Again, back from the IT side, observability is part of the picture. We're actually going to observe what's going on in these IT systems and then decide how to act, which is different from how people might have done it before, where they just planned to do something and then it would just magically appear. And obviously, in very simple kind of context, that's probably a reasonable way to approach it. But we're working now in contexts which are far from simple. And so the starting point is to try and work out what people mean when they say complexity, what's their mental model of how they even need to approach this stuff. Because some people might just think, oh, we just need to understand it better. We need to decompose it better. We need to label it better. And there's a certain amount of value in that. But if you think that that's the only solution, then that you're going to be heading in the wrong direction. So some of this is very much a kind of eye-opening and awareness-raising exercise or program of activity, really, to help people get to grips with something that actually feels quite scary, right, to an extent, which is we can't directly control this thing. Historically, through Industrial Revolution and the 20th century, we get better and better and better at controlling these machines. This isn't, when we're working with complex adaptive systems, these are not machines to control. These are more like an ecosystem where you might be able to put some boundaries and some constraints and see what emerges. And that kind of allowing emergence to happen with maybe some boundary setting is so different to what so many people are used to. It's so different. But the people who get it and start to be able to work with that, we see good results from that kind of approach.
Words. Yeah, it's great. You're really describing complexity in a way that makes us all understand the problem with it, kind of the challenge, I would say. So it's really great. I think it's very important, this part that you're saying, that as a leader, we just have to live with uncertainty. The control is away. We can't go for that. So you will have a session in the Leading Complexity program. And of course, everyone is curious about what will you talk about and what will they bring with them from that session.
So there's a few things here that we'll end up talking about. The first thing to say is that we've actually been very pleased, but also quite surprised by the contexts in which Team Topologies ideas are being used. So, for example, we know of a law firm in London providing legal services to corporates and individuals and so on. and they've been using ideas from Team Topologies, and we've been exploring this together with them, how they can provide coherent legal services to their customers. So without the problems associated with previous legal approaches to legal services. For example, traditionally in the UK, and I think in the US and some other places too, there's a lawyer who is the one who is trained and is seen as the fee earner. They're the person who brings in the money. If they're working on a case and they go on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks, the case just stops because it can't really progress without their input. Is that the way we want to provide modern legal services to our customers? Probably not. So the question then becomes, what would it take for a team of people with a mixture of skills to be able to provide ongoing legal services to their customers with skills that span multiple different kind of legal domains? So let's say you've got a business owner. She is going through a divorce and needs to sell the house and deal with custody of the kids, of the children. So that's 3 different kind of legal areas, let's say, that traditionally she would be bounced from one lawyer to another. But actually, what if we could provide a coherent legal services that dealt with all of that stuff? What would it take? And so you can start to use the Team Topologies ideas in that case, where you've got an ongoing responsibility, we've got a mixture of skills, maybe the fee earner acts more like a specialist or acts as a way to enable that team to work effectively. And this is nothing to do with IT and software, which is where we came from. Me and my author, Manuel Parish, that's our expertise. That's where we came from. So that's how we focused our responsibility, our awareness in the book, Team Topologies book. But people have seen these patterns and are adopting them outside, like in legal services. We didn't. This wasn't a push that we made, if you like. This is people coming to us. We've also seen it in healthcare. So we saw a couple of years ago someone who was a leading figure in the management of the part of the National Health Service in the UK, and she was saying, "Look, these Team Topologies ideas are great. We can use them for managing local doctors' practices, and let's apply these ideas like across the entire of the health service." And we know of people using the ideas inside accident and emergency teams, so a specialist like a surgeon, a doctor and a nurse, and an anaesthetist and all this kind of stuff, looking after someone who is like, they've got COVID, they're pregnant, they've just been in a car accident, in a car crash. This kind of approach here, we can start to think, okay, what's going on? If the ideas in Team Topologies can be used in IT and software for sure, but they can be used in legal services. They can be used in healthcare. We also know they can be used in education design and a whole bunch of other places like this. What's really going on? And in the masterclass, we'll dive into that and try to work out what's behind the ability of Team Topologies to work in these different contexts. We've got some clues, really, if you think about it, because at the heart of Team Topologies is the idea of flow, long-term ownership, and team cognitive load. And these things point towards what we think is actually happening kind of behind the scenes, if you like, why people from well outside of IT are starting to find these ideas useful and putting them into practice. So we'll go through and explore some of this stuff together and try to derive, if you like, why the ideas in Team Topologies might be useful, what's behind them, if you like, and then try to look towards the future to see some additional ways in which the Team Topologies ideas can actually be useful, particularly in this kind of uncertain world where we need to be very adaptive. We need to think about technology is changing very rapidly, and the operating context is changing rapidly. So operating context might be regulations, so legal regulations, compliance. It might be trading relations with other countries, changing all the time for lots of reasons, and so on and so on. So the world around us is changing pretty rapidly. We've got climate change in the mix as well, quite clearly now this year, which is part of the reason why other things are changing also. These things are connected. So the need to change and adapt is not going to go away. The need to change and adapt is only going to increase as these kind of challenges increase over the next few years. And so we'll look at how these Team Topologies ideas can help us to think through how we help our organization to continue to be adaptive. It's a move away from designing the ideal organization as a static thing and moving towards something that is continuous. It's a dynamic of reshaping the boundaries inside the organization and responsibilities for ultimately for agility. And we'll look at that in, like I said, in these different contexts.
Wow. So hopefully we will have a lot of lawyers and healthcare people as well participating in the program. I think that is really great. And especially the thing you say that organizations today need to be adaptable. I've been studying or reading a couple of books about like the big companies in Silicon Valley, and one thing that is common for all of them is the adaptability of the organization, being quickly to maneuver when something happens, and they could see that we need to have this, and how they could be really strong but flexible at the same time. It's interesting. So great. I'm very happy to have you in the program and very much looking forward to your session.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And October 26th is the date. So
Yep.
looking forward to hear more from you. And thank you very much for participating in this interview as well.
Super. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Take care.
Yes, that was interesting. Matthew's experience from helping and what hinders teams led to him writing the book Team Topologies. And also I noticed his first question to leaders was, what kind of complexity are you really dealing with? What would you say? Why is that an important question?
Well, I think first of all, he's trying to make the difference between a complicated and complex, and for most people, this is very easy to mix up. And so I think what Matthew is actually asking for is, are they in what we call the complex world, where we have a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns? And as we learned, we were talking about with Woody some episodes ago, we learned that in complex situations, effective collaboration or teaming, as he used as a word, is very important. And so kind of I think that Matthew is asking the leaders this question just to understand if teaming or collaboration is highly important in their situation.
Yeah, I think in complexity there is no one right answer. There's no one person with all the knowledge. So the importance of teams is increasing, and then also building your organization based on teams as building blocks. I think that is a really good way.
And different skills, different histories are important to get in the room, and different views actually.
Yeah. His book is called Team Topologies. What is topology?
Well, topology is used in different fields, but in general, it's about how different things are connecting to each other. And in this case, it's about how different types of teams could be connecting to each other to create the organization.
So how does that look then? What is kind of team typology, and what types of teams are there?
Well, in the easy version, I would say, and Matthew might have another opinion about this, but he is talking about, in the book, he's talking about 4 fundamental team topologies, different team types, and how they are interacting with each other. And I would say in the center is a stream aligned teams, that are the teams that are focusing on the customer and making sure that to deliver value to the customer, so to speak. But then you also need other teams, like the complicated subsystem teams. They are focusing on a subsystem and having all the knowledge about that. And their way of existing, the reason for existing, is to build like APIs or something, or making it easy for the stream-aligned teams to be able to consume the function they are having. You also have the enabling teams, and they are more like trainers or extra resources or extra people helping the stream-aligned teams. And then you can have a platform team, and that more like the infrastructure teams that are creating something to build your services on.
Could you say that the streamline team is the kind of the value creation team for the end users, and the others are kind of service or support teams for those value add teams?
Yeah, I would say in some way, of course, everyone are creating value, but they are creating value for different purposes in some way. Like the streamline teams, they are really focusing on the customer and the end customer, the paying customer or the user. But while the other ones are supporting the stream aligned teams.
Yeah. So in organizations, often there's a division between these stream aligned teams and other skilled aligned teams. How would you describe that?
Well, I mean, for a lot of organizations, it's kind of either or. And so either you have stream-aligned teams or you have component or skill-based teams or function teams. And what Matthew and Team Topologies is coming with is a possibility to mix those. And why this is important is because we need to have those streamlined teams. And the problem when we are either or, like we all only have streamlined teams, is that will probably not work. So after a while, having those skilled based teams will pop up and take over. So I think it's important to find a way being kind of in the middle. But still, we need to have those streamlined teams. And what they are doing is that they are focusing on different customer groups instead. So creating those teams is a way of finding how value is created within the company, like the value stream mapping or something. And for those that are not familiar with this, it's like looking at the organization from a little bit distance and saying, what kind of different user groups do we have? And to give an example, we could just take like a taxi company. They, of course, have the drivers. That is one group of users or customers. Another is, of course, the passengers, the paying passengers. But it could also be like the customer service center. That is another group of users. It could be finance, car service centers, affiliators, and yeah, that is just to mention a few.
But having that kind of diverse team to be able to deliver that customer value, doesn't it require very, very large teams? Maybe someone would like to put the whole company in one team, but we want to have smaller teams, right?
Yeah, and this is where we need all those other kind of teams. It's this that we call the supporting teams, like the complicated subsystem team, the platform team, and enabling teams. And this is to be able to make everything so easy that you having a team with like maximum of 10 people, you are able to serve the customers. And if you needed all the competence you had, you needed in a company, and I know companies that have like 100 of systems, and yeah, that means that you need to be 100 team members. But the difference here is if you have people working in all those systems and they are kind of lifting the abstraction of the system to some simple APIs to consume, then you can have a small team that is focusing on the customer and the customer needs, and they can be consuming all those functionalities that you have in the underlying systems, and just make it easy. And if we talk about the platform teams, it's the same thing there. We have, I mean, you don't need to know exactly how the operating system or how the computers are built up. You only need to know simple thing how you can work with it, kind of.
And isn't there any kind of drawbacks or pitfalls if you use this kind of approach to setting up your team structure?
Well, definitely it is. And the problem is usually that those supporting teams becoming like the bottleneck. And when they are becoming the bottleneck, sometimes this is that's changing the way of working, because they are supposed to see the Streamline team as a customer and be serving the customer, but instead they become a control function or a checkpoint. And then suddenly we have, this is making the whole process really complicated. So we need to make sure that we staff those supporting teams so they are always able to give support to the Streamline teams. Another thing is that they are forgetting that they are actually serving the Streamline teams. And the problem is when they are becoming a little bit too internally focused and are only building things because they think it's needed and ignore the customer.
I've seen kind of architectural teams that become the bottleneck because either they're too few little staffed, or that they take like an ivory tower approach, that they have all the answers. Nothing can get past them unless it's approved. Also seen the same in security and maybe integration or release, things like that. The intention from the start is to service the others, but they become a bottleneck. So that's a big pitfall.
And this can continue far behind or beyond the department. Like it could be facility management that are focusing on lowering price on the office instead of making sure that the office is in best shape for the Streamline teams, for instance.
So speed is the priority, the flow of value.
The flow is the idea. Yeah, exactly.
Matthew also brings up the concept of organization agility. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is usually what makes a lot of companies quite stiff. They have problem to be smooth and agile. And of course you can't solve this completely. But the idea of having streamlined teams, since they are focusing on the customers, and the customer base are not changed so much. It's usually the same kind of customer groups over and from year to year. So you don't need to change those teams, because their most important asset is their understanding of the customer. But what is changing is the customer need. And the customer need is more for those service teams to deal with, because they need to then figure out that maybe we can't continue with this system. We need to change system. That means we need to change skills or hire new people that have this skill. So we are not reducing the problem with the stiffness in an organization based on skills, but we are at least reducing it. If we want to be really good at organizational agility, then we need to reduce the number of platforms. And that was something we talked about with Joe Justice in an early episode as well, the importance of reducing the number of platforms.
Yeah, so also adapting to the customer needs and adopting our offer and products, of course, but also the kind of adaptation continuously of the organization itself. So yeah, good teams, they adjust the need from the customer perspective, but they also challenge and take responsibility for their own growth and improvement. So improve themselves, their team, and the organization, which means that the organization is kind of continuously morphing, changing, adapting to serve the purpose of the organization and the customers. So it's not only doing agile, adaptive kind of development, but also the organization itself becomes kind of adaptive.
Absolutely. Moving on to highlights.
Yes.
Yes, I can start this time. Matthew is talking about traditionally management training and MBA programs haven't prepared leaders for this emergent complexity. I think that is so true, that we still educate leaders with the old paradigm. And the old paradigm is more the complicated systems where you have to have the right people to do the things that management are telling them. And in a complex world, that does not really work. So I definitely believe in what Matthew is saying, that maybe we need to change the educations as well.
Yeah, I think
What is your highlight?
You're trained to know, have all the answers, and be the person with being the expert rather than creating the environment for learning, adaptation, etc.
Yeah, it's more about getting things done the way it's decided.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I also thought it was interesting that he had worked outside IT with and organizations like lawyers and healthcare. So yeah, I think a lot of this comes from software background, because in software development, in huge systems, we talked about cloud services. There is this understanding of complexity, changes, lots of unknowns. But it doesn't mean that Team Topologies or this kind of or agile organizations is only for software or IT. It goes beyond that. So any organization works with complex or changing environments, and I think that's most nowadays. And I'm thinking also about Jos de Block that we had on a recent episode. He is the founder and CEO of Buurtzorg, the home care organization in Netherlands. And they had 15,000 people organized in, I think it was 450 self-organizing teams. So service teams, and they have or value-added teams, and then they have a small service organization with, I think, 50 people in the back office, and there were around 20 coaches, and they also have some platform teams supporting them with IT services, etc. So I think that's another good example of creating kind of this focus on streamlined teams with service teams.
Yeah, and I think we will see examples when we look for them. We will see examples everywhere, like in police. Lawyers was just a really good example, and it will go on. Meeting authorities where we are bounced between different people and different departments.
Going back to your previous highlight as well, I remember I asked him why is the kind of change going so slow? Why don't we see more of these kinds of organizations? And he actually mentioned, I think, the MBA programs, the traditional management trainings. Like we're trained to see organizations in a certain way, and we're not really open to the possibility of organizing it in different new ways.
Yeah. It starts with the training. So going on to the next highlight, I have another thing here. He says, move away from designing the ideal organization as a static thing and move towards something that is continuous. And I really like this, and I will continue quoting because I will now go to Amy Edmondson, who wrote an article a couple of years ago. And she was saying that companies must break down silos and get people working together across boundaries. And the normal way we solve the problem when two different teams need to work with each other is to reorganize and make them kind of sit in the same organization. And what Amy is saying then is formal restructuring, like reorganization, is costly, confusing, and slow. And of course, as the world around us are moving quicker and quicker, we can't be having something that is confusing and slow and costly. So maybe good collaboration is better than reorganizations.
Yeah, and I think when big organizations have these kind of big reorgs, that means that they haven't been constantly adapting. They haven't had an agile organization, because now the reality is so far from the need, so that they have to make these huge shifts and big layoffs and huge reorganizations. So yeah, it's much better if you can adapt your organization every day. You would not have to have those kind of big reorgs and big kind of changes from one static view to another static view.
Yeah. So sometimes we just have to realize that sitting down on a desk, looking at the organization, trying to figure out what is the best way, we will probably never find the best way. And maybe find something that is good enough, and then make sure that we can collaborate across the boundaries instead. Okay, going for another highlight here. Matthew was saying, when we work with complex adaptive systems, these are not machines to control. These are more like ecosystem where we might be able to put some boundaries and some constraints and see what emerges.
Yeah, I think this is an essential shift in mindset. So not seeing that you can manipulate the system as a machine, but understanding it's a complex adaptive system, or more of an ecosystem, as he mentioned, and you can then work with constraints and boundaries and intentions to form it, to nudge it, so to say, but it's not like managing it.
Yeah. Great then.
Okay, let's wrap up for today. As usual, we're curious about your reflections and comments, so please share them. And if you want to learn more about Team Topologies and Matthew's work, you can watch his masterclass in earlier years sessions from our Leading Complexity program. And that you can find on leadingcomplexity.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.